Welcome to episode 249 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with Western Bulldogs CEO Ameet Bains.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who is at your local esports bar converting fans to join Gravitas, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan. I'm actually heading to an esports bar, local esports bar here in Melbourne, GG's. And I'll be as always, converting fans to join my esports team, Gravitas. You can find me here at Sean Callanan on most social channels, and also sportsgeekhq.com is where all things Sports Geek live. Podcast being one, the newsletter, Sports Geek News. You can sign up if you haven't done already. Sports Geek News. Just go to sportsgeekhq.com/SGN. And if you're looking for an esports team to follow, please follow mine, Gravitas, at Gravitas on Twitter or Gravitas GG on the internet. Before I get into this conversation with Ameet Bains, CEO, part of our CEO series, CEO of the Western Bulldogs here in the AFL, just want to talk a little bit about some of the work that we do and how we can help you. Part of the work we do is education and training, helping teams get up to speed with digital, looking at new strategies, looking at new channels, looking at new areas, and those areas might be things like esports. So if you're interested in that, in bringing your team up to speed on different components of digital and different things that they can tackle, I'm more than happy to talk to you in that sense. Then also there's the Pick My Brain, which is a 2-hour session, a consulting session. It's a really good Kickstarter. If you've either got a project in mind or you want to kickstart your season or do a quick review, that's a 2-hour go-to meeting. You simply book in, and we dive in on whatever topic you like. Previously, it's been looking at channel strategy or a specific campaign, or talking to a commercial team about a particular deal and trying to tweak that deal. So it has a lot of scope. But if you're interested in that, please go to sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain. But otherwise, what I have been doing and what I've been doing well is helping teams and leagues better commercialize their digital assets. So understanding what their audience is, understanding what their content proposition is, what their channel strategy is, and how they can value their content and what they're doing. Very much as part of that in the digital to dollars process, which I'll talk about later. But if you're interested in any of that, please reach out. You can always get me, Sean, at sportsgeekhq.com. This conversation I had with Ameet Bains just in the lead up to the AFL Finals series. The AFL Finals is the top 8 where they're going to fight it out to make that last weekend in September in the AFL Grand Final. And I spoke to Ameet just a week after they'd qualified and had the bye round, and they were looking forward to the final series is about to kick off. By the time this is recorded, we will know the result, but I just want to give you that context of when Ameet was talking. So this is my chat with Ameet Bains, CEO of the Western Bulldogs. Very happy to be here in the media studio in the bowels of the VU Whitten Oval with Ameet Bains. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
You are CEO, I haven't introduced you probably, CEO of the Western Bulldogs, a play in the AFL. What I normally like to ask people at the start is, how did you get here? How did you get your break into the world of sports business?
Yeah, my journey is probably a little bit different to many in football. I was a lawyer first and foremost, and worked at a law firm in the city for a number of years before then transitioning across to Toyota Australia, again, predominantly in a legal role. At Toyota, I was really fortunate to work across a bunch of sports. At the time, sort of mid-2000s, when I was there, Toyota was and still is major sponsor of most things. Australian
so it was
sport.
a lot of legal sponsorship contracts and sort of making sure, because again, they're a big sponsorship buyer in this market and around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, and they still are, the major sponsor of the AFL, had some clubs, players, were the number 2 sponsor to Telstra at the NRL at the time, and then, motorsport, horse racing, you name it, they did it in sports and entertainment. And yeah, was fortunate enough to work on it from a legal perspective. And so particularly with the AFL being Melbourne-based, whilst our sales and marketing headquarters were in Sydney, had a lot more familiarity with the AFL side of things. So the role had some strategic elements to it as well.
And so did that sort of whet your appetite for the world of sport and the sports business? And was there a moment or an epiphany where you sort of said, "Oh, this is an industry that's of interest. This is where I want to go"? How did you sort of make that leap out of law and into the world of sport? Yeah,
I had I suppose an underlying ambition to work in sport, and probably had a couple of close run opportunities over the journey, but had sort of committed myself to Toyota and was really happy to be working in sport, albeit as a sponsor rather than on the or inside the fence.
Yep, clubland as we call it in Australia.
Yeah, or with a governing body, and was fortunate enough that coming out of the 2010 final series, St Kilda obviously went perilously close to winning the AFL Premiership. Had a draw and then lost the replay the following week. They underwent a bit of a transformation in the off-season, and one of those things was the creation of a new list management role that straddled a few different areas, but they really wanted someone who had some legal and corporate experience to bring into the organisation. A few reasons with that, but particularly around salary cap management, player contracts, the increasing administrative burden that the AFL was placing on clubs in that environment. So things fell really nicely for me, because it meant that for those that were already in the industry and had, countless more years experience than I on the football side, didn't have the legal corporate background. And fortunately for me, competing with corporate lawyers from outside the sporting industry, I had a lot of background at Toyota, so fell nicely.
So is it similar to, like, you hear the term in NFL and MLB, capologists and these people list management and looking at all the permutations of what a collective bargaining agreement is, what player contracts doing? Was that why, I guess, your legal background gave you an advantage, or that's why it was sort of expanded that role?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was predicated on having, the team of experts that headed up the recruiting aspects itself, and things that I could become more au fait with, I suppose, with time in the role.
Yep.
But my role was certainly that, and then with the capacity to do broader legal work across the commercial side of the business as well. So it was a role that fell beautifully and started the Saints officially in January 2011.
And so how did that role evolve? Obviously, you're doing a lot of the stuff from a legal point of view and still with your lawyer hat on, but then getting more and more into list management, the negotiation machinations of trade week and trades and player trades, and then free agency, and these new things start developing. How did that role evolve?
Yeah, I think part of it is exactly how you phrase it, and the role evolves with the changing nature of the competition as well, and what roles across all clubs are required to oversee. I think the other major change in terms of my career happened when Matt Finnis became CEO of the Saints in 2014.
Yep.
And he led, as CEOs can do, led a bit of an internal restructure as well, and my role got elevated to the Chief Operating Officer capacity, and within that became, really high-level strategic on the list management, salary cap front, and sort of other football governance matters, but then had an increased commercial weighting, if you like, and particularly around some of the club's bigger projects at the time. So New Zealand was one, and probably the other one that still has some significance is the move back to Moorabbin. I was overseeing that project as well.
So that effectively gives you that, I guess, that view of the CEO seat in that sort of 2IC role of a COO, enough operations experience to know what the footy ops side looks like, and both the player management and the coaching stuff. But getting that wider experience across the business in that role? Yeah,
absolutely. And I was really fortunate in terms of having a CEO like Matt at the Saints, incredibly generous in terms of his development towards me and the opportunities that I got, both in terms of work but also outside the office as well. That, I suppose having that broad spectrum of experience then lends itself to a CEO type role.
And was that something that was on the horizon for either at the club at St Kilda or looking at other spots and saying, well, if I want to be CEO, I will have to move. Matt's he's doing a good job. You're not taking his role, but how did you sort of start looking at that as, that's the type of role I want? And then sort of how did you come into the Bulldogs role?
Yeah, I think you have open discussions around things like that, and particularly in sport and sporting clubs where the management structure and, in fact, most parts of the business are quite flat. So it's certainly something that I've adopted in terms of my leadership here at the Bulldogs, and that our executive team do well. And that is really giving people the opportunity to develop and grow, but also recognising that given that it is a flat structure, sometimes it does mean that they need to go elsewhere to take that step up. And we'd had conversations around that, and I was certainly minded that at the right time, if the opportunity came up, it would probably have to be to leave the Saints. And it
is a small industry, so you're always networking, and you always see when like we're seeing coaching roles come up, and then you're also seeing CEO roles come up. Names will get floated, so there's a little bit of working people who know the role coming up, but then there's a little bit of what is the press saying, making sure your name is being floated because someone else might not know. Was that just part of, I guess, the networking that you were doing the whole time in the industry, so people started seeing you as a candidate?
Yeah, it's also probably the first time I felt real discomfort working in the industry. Yeah. I mean, if you're a coach or if you're players, there's obviously a lot of personal scrutiny. For most of the rest of us, it's a collective scrutiny. How's the team performing on field, off field? So indirectly, you're drawn into that, but it's not really by name reference or things like that. So there was certainly a level of discomfort at the time when some of these jobs are coming up, and there were 4 jobs going around the same time when I was lucky enough to get the Bulldogs job. So there is that supposition, and like anything of an industry this size, that people have got some really nice things to say about you, and others don't. So you try not to get caught up in different things.
Yeah, I mean, it is the unique part of sports business. We don't have fans of Coles or Woolworths or Toyota going, oh, gee, I hope we get this guy in as the head honcho or this woman in as the one that's running my club because they're going to make it succeed. But you do have everyday punters like having their say and really passionate about the club, which is great, which is what makes sports great. But it is definitely unique from an executive point of view because you're not normally in that role.
No, you're not. But as you say, it is unique, and it's a great thing. The passion that the fans bring, and none of us would be employed without that passion.
No, definitely. So you became take us through becoming the CEO of the Bulldogs. Obviously, after a very, very successful period in a historic premiership in 2016. When did you come into the CEO chair?
Yeah, so I was appointed in October 2017 and then started a couple of weeks before Christmas in 2017. So essentially 12 months after that premiership. But yeah, as you say, it had been a remarkable period. I attended that grand final actually with a good friend of mine, Lindsay Gilby, who was at the Saints at the time, and perversely with him and through him ended up in the Bulldogs rooms for about what was also uncomfortable for probably about 5 minutes, having been employed elsewhere. But yeah, I have some pretty fond memories of being impartial at that game, but wanting to see the Bulldogs do well.
So 12 months on, like you said, it was a drought-breaking premiership in 2016, and you come in 12 months later. Success, one measure of success in football and in sport is winning on the field, and other areas are, off the field and what you do off the field. So what was your assessment, or what was your impressions first day coming into the role?
Yeah, very positive. I think particularly in sport as well, whilst all sporting clubs try their very best to become financially independent of on-field performance, that direct correlation is still very strong. It's just a matter of degrees depending on the size of the organisation. So for us, having won the 2016 flag, laid the foundations for a lot of off-field success, particularly in 2017. So, I make no bones in saying that I came into this club at a very fortunate time where a lot of people had done a lot of good work for a number of years, and was coming to a club that was very financially stable, and it obviously had some really recent on-field success.
Yep. And so what were some of the, as CEO, you're presenting back to a board and saying this is our direction, this is where we want to go. What are some of the key pillars and themes that you're driving, and the board wants you to be driving for the Bulldogs?
Yeah, well, I think one of the biggest challenges, I suppose, for me coming in at the outset was that I was coming in after a bit of instability in the CEO ranks. There'd been a few changes in the previous few years, so I saw as one of my first tasks to really provide that stability. And as you touch on, particularly in a strategic sense, it's obviously hard with a lack of continuity for someone to really leave an indelible mark on the organisation, both in a strategic sense and a cultural sense. So I think for me that was certainly the most pressing thing. Yep. Starting before Christmas also gave me an opportunity just to have 2 weeks in the business just talking to people without needing to worry about anything else, and then come out of the Christmas New Year period with a pretty clear idea on what the 5 or 6 most urgent operational matters were to address as well. So that, coupled with, as I said, the club being in a really strong position, gave me an opportunity to take the first couple of months to really get immersed in the club and understand what was going on, rather than having to attend to anything critical from moment one.
Yeah, so, I mean, people in Australia will know that Melbourne is a crazy sports town and there's a lot of competition, especially in AFL with so many teams. With the Bulldogs, Western Bulldogs have long been, I spoke to Nick Trilson previously on the podcast, long been the team of the West, and really engaging the community. And it's something that, us on the eastern side of Melbourne, or the CBD where I live, it doesn't get a lot of publicity. But tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing out here in West and how important it is to your club.
Yeah, it's huge. So I think one of the hallmarks of our football club and what separates us from most clubs, really, not just the ones in Melbourne, is that we've been here in West Footscray for well over 100 years. So we've become, a real part and a real pillar of the community during that time as well. So there are people that have lived in the streets adjoining our facility here at the VU Whitten Oval for decades. It's a generational thing, and they've all got stories to tell about their connection to the club. I think you also see it, and we've certainly seen it in staff who started working with us in recent times, who have lived locally, barrack for another team, but still have strong stories about what the streets were like in the lead into the 2016 grand final and then subsequently after we won. So that's been amazing. And then I think what really underpins it all is that through our Western Bulldogs Community Foundation, which has been in existence in one way or shape for many, many years, we run a lot of community health programs as well. So men's health, women's health, youth leadership and diversity and inclusion programs as well, that really set us apart, and I guess really build that strong link to an ever-changing community.
I mean, your point on the ever-changing community, especially out west, this is not, you're not here because it's a growing region. Like you said, you've been here for many years, but multiculturally and the diverse nature of the community out west, it does present its challenges, but massive opportunities for you as a team to be able to connect with them, to connect with new Australians and say, this is what our game is, and we're welcoming. How much is the club, all those community programs weave into that, because it's fan development is in one sense of the equation for you guys?
Yeah, it is. So for those who aren't completely au fait with it, the west of Melbourne is the fastest growing region in Australia. Yep. And the majority of that growth is really being driven by migration. So as you say, it's an incredible opportunity to engage with new fans who don't have a team, but also they don't have a connection to Australian rules football. So it's an opportunity, but it's a significant challenge within that opportunity. I think what we've started to do better as a club and with the AFL is work more collaboratively and start to look at the west of Melbourne, a bit like the west of Sydney, and try and really bring some of the initiatives that are being used in Western Sydney to the west of Melbourne to engage with that community. Because whilst we have, and it's an interesting point you make around the fan engagement part, whilst we've run these community programs for many years with success, we haven't tended to do it for any other reason other than helping the community. Yep. So we haven't really pushed even in a subtle way, some of those fan engagement opportunities. There might have been some free ticketing initiatives or things like that, but we haven't sought to impose the Western Bulldogs brand as such on that community. But there's a real opportunity to do that now, and in other ways. I mean, kids and schools and Auskick centres are the way to go, and other clubs have started to do it as well. But even if you look at what's been done interstate, running an Auskick centre on a Wednesday night after school at the local school is a better way for engaging with a multicultural community than having a traditional Auskick set up on a Saturday morning where family has to get organised, it's got to be accessible. There's a range of hurdles to making it happen.
Yeah, and the thing is now getting that mix of the diehard, been living down the street for 70 years, always followed the Bulldogs, and then having a club that has completely new fans that are at their first or second game.
Yes.
That's the beauty of sport.
It's a massive challenge, and it's a massive challenge for the AFL, and it is what generates a lot of the debate at different times. AFLX is a great example of that. I think even if we look at the Bulldogs ourselves, we laced up round one with a Thor-inspired jumper to coincide with the opening of the newly named Marvel Stadium. And that was met, initially at least, with a bit of derision and cynicism around that. But that was never really designed to appeal to the traditional fans. It's really more about the kids and getting new fans on board, and it was successful. But as you point out as well, it's a fine line to straddle. You don't want to ostracise any of your long-standing fans, but at the same time, you need to do things that are a bit different because you're not going to communicate to new fans in the same way.
Yeah, and it is to cut through, and that's where it is. The traditional fans or some of the most vocal fans on digital channels might not necessarily, they're already rusted on, and they're going to come, rain, hail, or shine, and they're going to be very noisy. But you've got, it's hard to explain to them that initiative, whether it's a Thor jumper or doing something a little bit differently, it's not for them. It's for the next generation of fans or someone that's new to the game. And it's a bit of a balancing act. Oh,
it is. And look, my son's a good example. Like, he loves the Bulldogs. He loves football. But his favourite Bulldogs item of clothing is the Thor-inspired jumper. Yeah. And he wears that everywhere, and we'll be wearing that this weekend too.
Yeah, definitely. Another part, my part of the world, my family's up in Ballarat, and the Bulldogs are now playing for premiership points in Ballarat. So that really does extend the West. How important is that partnership with Ballarat?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge on a strategic level, as you outline. I think our ambitions in terms of growing our fan bases through that entire Western corridor, so includes Ballarat, and the way that some of the next generation academies are aligned to clubs at the moment, probably a little bit technical, but the NGAs are essentially academies through which clubs are encouraged to develop talent, so boys and girls on the pathway, and to the extent that there are Indigenous or multicultural kids, if they're good enough come their draft year, clubs get priority access to those kids off the back of having developed them. Every club's got a region. Our region essentially starts from the west of Melbourne, so Docklands right through to the South Australian border. Okay. So we tend to do a lot of activity all the way through, even right through Warrnambool, Portland and beyond. But Ballarat is really the centrepiece of that for us. And as you say, now playing 2 games there a year has been a great outcome for us.
Anyone who has been to Ballarat knows it's one of the coldest places on earth. So you should be able to get a thermal sponsor or something. Maybe Thermos comes on board with the Bulldogs next year.
We weren't far off last year. We've been quite fortunate with the weather in both games this year, but the Port Adelaide game last year, I think enough people had screenshot photos of it. It was 3 degrees, feels like -3, and that was after a hailstorm had just moved through.
Yeah, but again, the feedback again from my family and friends, and some of them Bulldogs fans, some of them not, they all go, and that it really brings that local community feeling. It's not quite pulling up the cars up to the boundary and tooting the horn, but it does have that community feel.
Oh, it's great, and a real credit to the city of Ballarat and the Ballarat community for really embracing us as well. We had 2 great games there this year against the Brisbane Lions and Adelaide, virtual full houses for both. And as you say, it's a really unique experience. When you're sitting in the first few rows or standing on the hill, you can actually hear the players talking to each other. You can hear the slap of the body contact and things that you probably don't get unless you're at a suburban game.
And do you think as the partnership matures and you're playing more games there, you had a really important game in round 23 against Adelaide that had finals implications, and you won and get into the finals. We're talking here on Finals Eve. You think it becomes a little bit of a fortress, a bit of home ground advantage for the Bulldogs going forward?
Yeah, certainly. I think the more and more opportunity we get to play there, and we've played some JLT games as well in the pre-season, all of that helps us, and certainly with the crowd supporting us. So in that last game last weekend, as you referenced, it was about a 95% Bulldogs crowd as well. So I think those sorts of grounds, particularly with small crowds where you can hear everything when you're inside the playing arena, certainly builds that fortress-like feel.
And it must be great for Bulldogs fans. They don't have to be complaining about flights and things like that. They just get in the car 2 hours down the road to Ballarat and they're there for a game.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic and it's great. We, you're always listening to fan feedback on, what you're doing right and what you're not. And we didn't quite get it right with the ticketing and things last year, and that had an impact on attendances. But to the credit of our consumer team, we changed a few things around this year, and the attendances spoke for themselves.
So you talked a little bit about the reasoning behind it, and you sort of had your player ops hat back on and list management hat, and developing an opportunity and a pool with the next generation academies to find new players. You mentioned boys and girls there. The Bulldogs have been pioneers in the AFL women's movement, really being early adopters. Now AFLW in entering its third year. How important is now having an official women's club and making the club whole from a point of view of having a men's and a women's team?
It's goes without saying, it's absolutely fantastic. Was lucky enough in my first few months to be here when we won the AFLW Premiership in season 2, and that was magnificent. But I think, one of the things that Matt Finnis and I spoke about when I was at St Kilda, and in the disappointment of missing out on a team in the initial phase, was being left behind commercially by clubs that had a women's team. And there's been an element of that, and at the Bulldogs we're clearly fortunate to have had brands like Priceline, Pancake Parlour, Bob Jane T-Marts be with us from the start. But I think the real gap is in the cultural sense, and the normalisation of a lot of things by having female athletes in our buildings been fantastic. Football clubs have always been the last bastion of male refuge in many ways, and look, there are times and occasions where that's still appropriate in terms of the training and everything for your men's program. But for the club as a whole, it's been fantastic. And, whether it's, the positive role modelling that you see. I've got a 9-year-old daughter who can take it or leave it with the men's footy, always comes along, but loves the girls' footy, the women's footy. We went out to the VFLW yesterday, said it's finals eve in the AFL, but the VFL started yesterday. We had a great day, and to the credit of the women athletes as well, they're incredibly inclusive. So my daughter got pulled into the song at the end of the game, and was just a phenomenal moment that she'll never forget. And all of these moments are being made possible for her by having incredible women athletes.
Yeah, and they are pioneers. Like the women that are playing now are doing so, while still working or studying, getting a season in, playing VFLW, and then backing it up to play AFLW in the early, in 2020, they'll be back. It's an exciting part because it's the birth of what the league will become in years to come.
Oh, it is, and if we are genuine and realistic about it as Australian sports followers, if we look at our national teams, and you picked out the best 10 performing national teams, most are women's teams, and I think it's been terrific that more men have actually got behind supporting those teams and those athletes as well.
And the Whitten Oval, currently under redevelopment. What's the plan for this precinct going forward? Yeah,
so over the course of 2019, we've essentially completed two things. The first was actual physical construction, and that was an upgrade to the AFLW change room. So our women now have their own set of change rooms, but also training facilities, office space, breakout areas, things like that the men have. So it's been great to give them that opportunity. It also led to the development of upgraded rooms for opposition teams. So that's AFLW as well as VFLW, and a brand new scoreboard at the Geelong Road end of the ground. So that was the physical construction. And what we've done apart from that, which has been the bigger undertaking, is complete a master plan, which is really the 15 to 20 year vision of what this entire precinct can look like.
And that's, again, weaving into your key themes around the community and connecting it and making it more of a facility that more of the community can use?
Yeah, so there's a number of elements to it. First and foremost, I suppose it's upgrading our own training and administration facilities. We're still fortunate that, say, even in the men's space, we've got terrific facilities here, but they are 9 or 10 years old now, and every year someone's doing something brand new. So you like to keep up with that, to give our players the best facilities, but also to be a place where we can attract and retain players and staff. Certainly from our community perspective, it gives us an opportunity to build out some more dedicated space for the programs that we run. But it also gives us an opportunity to incorporate other commercial revenue streams within the facility as well. One of the things that we've spoken about as a club quite openly is the want to exit gaming and get out of pokie machines. But there's a commercial reality with how they perform. So having a facility here where there can be other commercial retail offerings, a function centre, down the track potential residential developments as well are all very exciting things to look forward to.
So as CEO, how much, looking back at your previous roles, how much are you still in the footy ops side? We're going to have, a final series ahead of us, and then trade week that seems to become a fortnight or a month these days in the AFL world. How much do you still play a part in that, or advise, or discuss it with your footy ops people from a player list management and all those kind of things? How do you keep that? How do you keep that balance and also bring that experience?
Yeah, I think inevitably in the CEO's role, you have to be across everything, and football's your core part of your business. So as we spoke about earlier, if that's not going well, then it affects everything else, regardless of how well you're doing it. But there's also the reality that you end up being a lot more hands-on in the commercial space, which is only natural. For me personally, I see my role, given my experience, to ask harder questions and ensure process and rigor is being followed. Yep. It's certainly not to tell or instruct
you're not there to second guess or anything like that.
No, it's just asking the questions. And say particularly in a list management sense, I'm part of the list management committee and try and get along to most meetings. But again, it's really just asking the right questions from my experience. But in that example, letting Sam Power, Nick Austin and the team then, the ones who are actually doing the work, make the right decisions.
And do you think you're seeing there's the balance of the analytics and the money ball that we're seeing in baseball, and we're seeing similar things in the NBA? Do you think there's more and more of that analysis and analytics happening in the world of AFL?
Oh, there certainly is, and there certainly needs to be more. We're very fortunate to have had a 25, 26-year relationship with Victoria University, and a key component of that has been through sports science and data analytics. I think where that area is really progressing, certainly for us now, is in the list management space. Yep. We're not unique. We're certainly not first in doing that, but it's something that we've invested in more heavily, and I think there's a real value to doing that. There's a lot more statistical information available now. So even Champion Data now has some pretty detailed statistics on the under-18 pathways, the national championships. So I think the statistical information available is still outstripping the capacity and capability to analyse it. So that's why I think that there's still a way to go for clubs to invest in it.
And also because the AFL is such a unique game, and it being an Indigenous game, there's no one else outside of Australia doing studies on how far guys are running, or whether they should be running more or less, or how much they should be training or less, because it's really just this industry. It's 18 clubs, and now we've got to now modify all of those analysis and statistics for women. Because it's not necessarily applying exactly the same, and
I think for our game as well, it's also quite unique with the size of the playing field, the number of athletes. So there are a lot of variables in it that don't make a pure statistical analysis enough. Whereas I know you're a massive American sports fan as well, and you can pick up the box scores from a baseball game, and you've got a really good idea of what's happened without having to watch a play. NFL, college football, you can watch on tape. And again, you haven't really missed anything from being live, whereas from an AFL perspective, there are a lot of variables that make the statistics increasingly important, but not as dominant a force as it can be, say, in American sports.
Yeah, definitely, because you can have a guy running around for 5 minutes, not get a touch, but he's dragging his player to all of these different areas, and it doesn't come up in any sheet at all.
Correct.
And that does make it tough. What does on game day, CEOs have a varied role. What does your game day look like for a Bulldogs home game?
So we generally run a function of some description at every home game, and likewise attend one at every away game. So it's generally hosting a table of people, whether they're politicians or corporates, or certainly the opposition CEO as well, and then just watching the game from a comfortable seat out the front, all of which sounds fantastic, and it is first world problem that I'm about to complain about. But often I just like being in the zone, and particularly having spent so much time in the football side of things at an AFL club, I really just want in that 2-hour period the capacity to watch the game, analyse it without interruption, and depending on who you're with on any given day, that's not there.
Okay, yeah. So you just want to it is the 2 hours you get to enjoy footy, because for the other 7 days of the week you're working footy. That's right. And sometimes you also have to explain footy to a new sponsor or someone, and it's just sometimes. But you must still like that. That must be the joy. That's part of being in sport. To the highs and lows of being part of those 2 hours and the 5 minutes in the rooms. You don't have to be snuck in now. You can go in yourself.
Oh no, we're incredibly fortunate and privileged to do what we do, and having been someone that grew up absolutely loving sport and football in particular, to now have the opportunities to do those things, and whilst you've got no impact on what happens on those 2 hours, from a management perspective, still being able to ride the highs and lows is why we all do it.
And how do you manage those highs and lows? Because you can be, whether it's taking work home from when you're leaving the Whitten Oval here, or after a big win or a big loss. How do you step away and give yourself a break? Yeah,
I think family's the best thing for that. And one of the things I've really enjoyed in this role is the capacity to take the family along to games. So we've got our first final in the AFL this weekend up in Sydney, so we'll go up. Kath, my wife, and 2 kids as well. And, as much as the kids get disappointed when we lose as well, their attention span has generally shifted to something else by the time we're in the car. So I think you just take those opportunities to move on if you haven't had a great night at the office. But it's also doing other things during the week, I guess, to combat the stress as well, because, it's a pretty unforgiving industry.
It is, but it all the good thing is it all resets on Monday. Everyone turns up to Monday and we've got another job in front of us, and then by Thursday, Friday, all the staff are up, everyone's back, the supporters are all positive. So again, that's what makes it this very much a unique industry.
Oh, it does. And I think what the AFL will be most pleased with in, say, season 2019 is the evenness of the competition. Even maybe not in a wins and losses sense as the season washes through, but as you've seen, the capacity of one team to beat another on any given day is there. So even Gold Coast, who finished bottom, had 3 or 4 wins. They beat us earlier in the year as well, and I think they might have beaten one other finalist. So there is that capacity.
So I want to finish off with the Sportsgear Closing 5. I'm here with Ameet Bains, CEO of the Western Bulldogs. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I can certainly remember a couple of the first professional sporting events I attended. So you're a Ballarat boy. I was a Bendigo boy. Okay. So I think one of the enduring memories of childhood is when the big show comes to town. And we were fortunate to always have at least one VFL practice match, as it was back then, and you go along, and I was a Carlton supporter, so certainly have fond memories of watching VFL practice games at the QEO as a young kid, before then obviously coming to Melbourne for games. But the other thing, I'm also a huge cricket fan, and the touring test team always used to play Victoria in a 4-day game at the QEO, the same venue in the summer. So I've still got fond memories of seeing, the West. I loved the West Indian cricket team back then. Seeing the West Indies play.
So is that Sir Vivian Richards?
My favourite sports person of all time, Viv Richards. Had the opportunity to meet him when he was out here with the Melbourne Stars about 3 years ago. And that old adage of sometimes you shouldn't meet your heroes is probably a good one. He was pretty disinterested. Maybe it was just me. But watching the cricket there was fantastic as well.
Terrific. You would have been to a fair few sports events in your time. You probably had a few corporate lunches at events. Do you have a favourite food memory at a sports event as they keep upping the food game at sports events?
I do, and I don't think it's going to be that adventurous, but it's just there's something about it. But having the hot dogs at ballparks in America, different sizes and shapes, but having a hot dog coupled with a bud, still does it for me.
Yeah, the old the Dodger dog at Dodger Stadium is a pretty good memory. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Twitter.
Yep. Just to check what's happened on results?
Yeah, sports mostly. Follow a few different lifestyle accounts as well as news accounts, but particularly sport, overnight sport, cricket, soccer, American sport. Is
there someone that you either listen to, read, or follow that the podcast listeners should follow, and why?
Countless sports ones, but maybe go a little bit left of field. My favourite Twitter account to follow, and it's on Instagram as well, is the New Yorker cartoons.
Okay.
Always a very witty and funny look at the world at any given point in time, and potentially in America they need more and more of that.
Yep.
Zlatan Ibrahimovic as well on both forums. Is very funny if you're ever short on confidence and finding ways on how to pep yourself up. He's always a very good one.
Do you occasionally go with "I am Ameet"?
No? I haven't rolled with that yet. Maybe in the mirror one day if it's all falling apart.
Yeah, I am Zlatan. It's one of the best. So I'll ask you this sort of two ways. What social media platform is your MVP? And maybe what do you think what one is working best for the Bulldogs?
Certainly for me it's Twitter, just because I find it to be my best source of news and in real time. It's not always obviously factual. People go with things very early to try and be the newsbreaker. But I think, most reliably, it's the best for me. And I do like Instagram as well, particularly, I've got a private account just with friends, so it's a good opportunity with friends and family.
Stay connected.
Overseas to see how things are going. I think for the club, it has been Facebook, Instagram. I mean, Twitter's very strong as well, but any of the mediums where you can share video content and particularly behind the scenes, inner sanctum video content has the best cut through for us. So it'd have to be those.
Yeah, terrific. Where can people connect with you if they were to look for you on the internet? What's the best way to reach out and say that they've listened to the podcast?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter as well as I said, Instagram's a close account, but certainly on Twitter.
Ameet_Bains.
That's it. That's the one. Happy for people to reach out, provide some real-time feedback, because that's what the AFL industry is all about.
It is. I mean, that's what sport and Twitter are a great match because of that. Whether it's while people are watching a game or as big news breaks, it is the place that people go to. It still is very much a news platform. So highly recommend it. And if you are listening to this podcast, please send me a tweet. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
No worries. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
New workshops on audience, content, distribution, valuation, and pitch following Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process. Go to digitaltodollars.com.
Thanks again to Ameet Bains from the Western Bulldogs. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. Reach out to him, please. Please tell him that you listened to the episode. It really means a lot to me when guests link up and tell guests, listeners link up with guests and tell them they listen. If you follow on Twitter, as Ameet said, he's a keen Twitter user at Ameet Bains, AMEET_Bains. So give him a follow and check out what the Western Bulldogs have been doing on their social channels, and especially around their community initiatives out west, really thriving in that western region of Melbourne. All of those links will be in the show notes, sportsgeekhq.com/249. And I think this was a first for Sports Geek as far as a guest connection point of view. Ameet's cousin, Darpin Randhawa from McLaren, who was in our Money and Esports series, is actually Ameet's cousin. Now, if there is another guest that's listening that has a family member or cousin that I can't remember, that there is a connection, I'd love to know it. Please send me an email. Really appreciate Ameet hosting me out at the VU Whitten Oval and checking in with what they're doing. Before we wrap up, I wanted to do a bit of a recap of Melbourne Esports Open. So it was held in Melbourne, obviously, at the Rod Laver Arena in Melbourne Olympic Park precinct. It was very successful from my point of view last year. Very much a different experience from what I experienced last year. Last year I went as an interested observer of the world of esports. And last year they had Rod Laver Arena was the main stage on both the Saturday and Sunday, and then they had multiple stages on Margaret Court Arena. And this year it expanded to also be taking on Melbourne Arena. It was a big bump in attendance. 17,000 people turned up, which is the largest attendance of an esports event in Australia. It was up from 12,000, and I was really pleased that we had a presence there. Gravitas had a booth with our friends at Sumner Society. It was absolutely bumper to bumper, pumping for 2 days straight. We had players playing 1v1s of League of Legends with fans. We had a lot of OPL teams. Thanks to the OPL teams that stopped by our booth for a couple of games and to say hello. The boys of the Direwolves, Mammoth, congratulations on winning the OPL Split 2 Championship, and good luck at Worlds. They also stopped by our booth, and also it was great to have our LCS counterparts from North America, the Golden Guardians, who are part of the Golden State Warriors group. It was great to have the Golden Guardians both come down to the booth. It was good to see Aniro, the coach, take on Juves in a 1v1. I will put a link into Roaming Ray, which is a good video sort of showing off Melbourne Arena, and you'll hear how that 1v1 went. It was also exceptional, and it filled me with pride to see our player, our all-star, top laner Jackson Pabu Pavone, appear on the Rod Laver Arena stage in an exhibition match with the Golden Guardians. So it's great to see the Gravitas jersey up on the stage. I would have liked 4 more jerseys up there being for a grand final, but I think we really made the most of the opportunity to meet fans. I think the studies that Ben Allen shared at the Money in Esports event, 40% of esports fans in Australia have only been following esports in the last 2 years. And so that tells me there's a lot of new fans. I have no doubt new fans turned up to MEO and were captured, and now they are esports fans. And so I hope a portion of those have become Gravitas fans. We did shake a lot of hands. We did take a lot of photos, sign a lot of autographs. I think it's really important, and I think a bigger event strategy is something that esports should be looking to do, more of these live events. Congrats to TEG, Tim McGregor and the team there, and also Nick Vanzetti and ESL, who did a remarkable job in pulling it all together. If you want more esports, please check out our Money in Esports series. It's now available in Apple Podcasts. If you just put Money in Esports, it should come up. It should. It's available as a separate pod. So if you want to send someone a little bit of a primer on what is esports, that's a good one. It's 5 episodes, dives into a few different topics around broadcast, around building out events, and also the scene here in Australia. So that's available a few episodes back on the Sports Geek feed, or you can go to sgesports.com. Before I wrap up, like I said, one of the things that we do a lot of is helping teams commercialise their digital assets, and we do that via the digital to dollars process. Wanted to explain more how it can work for you. It's great for we're moving now into an off season for our football codes here in Australia, but starting the summer season and vice versa in the Northern Hemisphere, happy to do this wherever. But the digital dollar process is around 5 key pillars: knowing your audience, diving into your data, finding out some real important information about what segments you are talking to and should be talking to, knowing your content, making sure that's aligned with those audiences that you've identified and that are working for those purposes, and also looking to do it to both engage that audience but also grow that audience. It's exceptionally relevant in esports, especially as new fans are coming on board all the time. And then knowing your distribution. So what does your channel strategy look like? What channels should you be looking at? We're seeing new channels pop up now. Things like TikTok. Really interested to see what the NFL does. Recently announcing a deal with TikTok. How can sports get involved in that space? Will the challenge mechanism work well? Knowing that sports may have made some missteps, miscalculations with another youth platform like So really interested to see, how teams and leagues and influencers use TikTok and how they can use it to connect fans in an authentic way. And then the final two pieces are all about the commercialization, understanding the value of the assets you're building and the value of the IP that you're placing on those assets. And then knowing your pitch is how do you put that together to a cohesive offer to sponsors. So the first three work for any business at all, with sport or otherwise, to get your digital strategy aligned and your content plan sorted. So I'm happy to discuss this, how we can help you as a league, team, an athlete, coach, or a business. What we like to do as an outcome of the digital dollars process is to work towards an event, which we like to call digital upfronts, which is where you get to preview and to put a bit of sizzle around what you're trying to do in the digital space to get your sponsors and partners excited. And the good thing about digital upfronts, you don't actually have to build them. You just have to say you're going to build them and get some excitement from your partners. So it's a really good way to throw out those really big ideas and see if you can get a partner to bite down. So if you want to get in touch and want to learn more, go to digitaltodollars.com. or send me an email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Need help with your digital rate card? Not sure how to price your assets? Is there a disconnect between digital and commercial? That is where Sean works best, in digital divorce counselor mode. Book a time for a call with Sean to discuss the Sports Geek process. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.
Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.